And he laughs at psychoanalysis when psychoanalysis speaks about animals. He laughs at it, as he often does, to me sometimes a little too quickly. But not only does he laugh at it, he also tells us, which is even funnier, that the animals themselves laugh at psychoanalysis when psychoanalysis speaks about them. I quote Deleuze in translation: "We must distinguish three kinds of animals. First, individuated animals, family pets, sentimental, Oedipal animals, each with its own petty history, my cat, my dog. These animals invite us to regress, draw us into a narcissistic contemplation, and they are the only kind of animal psychoanalysis understands. The better to discover a daddy, a mommy, a little brother behind him, when, and then the parenthesis by Deleuze, when psychoanalysis talks about animals learn to laugh." That's page 240 of the translation. Deleuze then adds in italics, I quote, "Anyone who likes cats or dogs is a fool." Fool is the translation for con, which is as untranslatable as bête. Tous ceux qui aiment les chats et les chiens sont des cons. And then he goes on, "There is a second kind, animals with characteristics or attributes, genus, classification, or state animals. Animals as they are treated in the great divine myth in such a way as to extract from them series of structures, archetypes, or models. Jung is in any event profounder than Freud." Unquote. That's also Deleuze's absolute originality in France, admiring Jung more than Freud. He is probably the only philosopher, or the only French citizen who thinks that Jung is profounder than Freud. And he goes on, I quote again at length, "Finally, there are more demonic animals, pack or affect animals, that form a multiplicity, a becoming, a population, a tail. Or once again, cannot any animal be treated in all three ways? There is always the possibility that a given animal allows a cheetah or an elephant will be treated as a pet, my little beast. And at the other extreme, it is also possible for any animal to be treated in the mode of pack or swarm. That is our way, fellow sorcerers. Even the cat, even the dog, and the shepherd, the animal trainer, the devil, may have a favorite animal in the pack, although not at all in the way we were just discussing. Yes, any animal is or can be a pack, but to varying degrees of vocation that make it easier or harder to discover the multiplicity or multiplicity grade an animal contains, actually or virtually according to the case. Schools, bands, herds, populations are not inferior social forms. They are affects and powers, involutions that grip every animal in a becoming just as powerful as that of the human being with the animal. End of quote. Of course, the question that explicitly or indirectly traverses the whole seminar to which I refer is what is proper to man. Quel est le propre de l'homme? On the other hand, whether it's characterized as a perversion or sexual deviation, zoophilia, which compels making love with beasts or making love to beasts, or whether it's characterized as cruelty. This bestiality, this double bestiality, zoophilic or cruel, being zoophilic or cruel, double bestiality, also would be the proper of man. Zoophilia or cruelty, bestiality is the proper of man. That is something I study in detail in another part of this seminar in relation to Lacan. Now, to save time, I'll skip a long series of reflection on the French use of the word bête, or the word bêtise, and the critical reading of Lacan on bestiality as essentially human and related to the law. This has been, this passage of the seminar on Lacan and the animal has been translated into English in critical inquiry, I think, under the title Say the Animal Responded, something like that. Here, so, as I said earlier, Lacan defining bestiality as essentially human and related to the law, calling for responsibility and not for reaction. Again, this problematic opposition between responsibility and reaction. Here I'll simply note that Lacan opposes responsibility and reaction, reaction being essentially animal, response and responsibility being human. So for this tradition, what is proper to the beast or the animal would be neither bestiality nor bêtise or stupidity or dumbness. Now then, the question, how is la bêtise or bestiality possible? How is that possible? If it's not animal, if it's human, how is that possible? Comment la bêtise est-elle possible? That's la bêtise est non l'erreur. That's Deleuze's question. This question will have been raised, of course, in this form or another form by many people. However, Deleuze gave it a certain form in the text I mentioned a moment ago, Indifference and Repetition, which is, as you know, 12 years older than Mille Plateaux, older than the chapter from which I just read, namely Becoming Intense, Becoming Animal, Becoming Imperceptible. In Mille Plateaux, which devotes so many analyses to the becoming animal, Deleuze no longer refers to bêtise, la bêtise, the way he does in Difference and Repetition. The only occurrence of the word bêtise, at least that I found, concerned precisely a certain bêtise of psychoanalysis, which you're supposed to know, the stupidity of psychoanalysis, the stupidity of bêtise that psychoanalysis says when it addresses the question of masochism, and more generally when it speaks about animals. We wish, Deleuze says, we wish to make a simple point about psychoanalysis. From the beginning, it has often encountered the question of the becoming animals of the human being. Becoming animals of the human being. Okay. The becoming animal is human, is part of the human being. I interrupt my quote here just to note that for psychoanalysis, as for Deleuze, when he objects to psychoanalysis from that point of view, it is always a question of humanity, of man, of the becoming animal of man, of the history and histories of man in its or in their becoming animal. In other words, it's a question of the becoming anthropomorphically animal of man, and not a question of the animal or the beast, if one may say themselves. Not a question,